Let us have a look at the next example. This time I am working on this file called as fly.py, and let's see what's happening this time. Now we just saw that gravity in Zortan is much less as compared to Earth. So what happens is, if you weigh 15 kgs or less, then you can actually fly on Zortan. So what Lewis wants to do is, Lewis wants to see which of his friends can fly. So let's see how to work with this one. And there is one very important concept which is called as single responsibility principle. And let us see what do I mean by this principle in this video. So as a convention, let us create our main function first, and from there we will create functions as we require them. So let me define my main function. So I can say my define and main. This function does not take anything and it returns none. So I can write none over here. Now inside of this function, let us create the friends of Lewis. So let me create my dictionary of friends and let me assign some values to it. So here we can see that we have a couple of values. CC is weighing 54, Rocco is weighing 88, and so on. Let us also write the types for this one. So friends is my dictionary, the keys are strings, and the values are integers. What we can do over here is, instead of just declaring integers, we can also write a float. So in case if we have a decimal value in the future, we can easily handle it if we declare it as a float. Next, let us create a function called as flying friends and see which of the friends can fly. So I can say my function of flying friends, and we just have to pass the dictionary of friends. Now let us go up and let us start creating our functions. So as you can see, there is one small constraint, and that constraint is you have to weigh 15 kgs in order to fly. So what we can do is we can create a constant. So let me call the constant as maximum flying weight, and we can assign it a value of 15. Let us also define the type for this one. So since this is a constant, it has to be declared as final. But before we can write final, we need to import it. So here I can say that from typing, I want to import final, and here we can use the keyword of final. So our maximum flying weight is a final, and the type we can define it to be a float as well. Now let us go down and let us create the function for flying friends. So here we can say that define flying friends. This takes one argument. Let us call that argument as friends, and as you can see on line number 28, we are passing the argument of friends, and the type of friends is this one. It's dictionary, string, and float. So let me copy this right from here, and let me go back to my line number 18. So we can define the type right over here. So this friends is going to be a dictionary, and this function is not going to return anything, so I can just write none. Let me also write some documentation for this function. So what this function is going to do is, this function is going to display all of the flying and non-flying friends. Now remember that this function is creating a side effect. This function is not going to return anything. That's why we can say that this function creates a side effect. Now let us go down and let us define the body of this function. So here what we can do is, we can use a for loop to iterate over the friends and see which of the friends can fly or not. So I can say for the name and earth weight in the dictionary of friends, we want to get all of the items. Now remember that the keys are the names. So if you see right over here, the key is the name. That's why I'm naming this parameter as name, and the values are the weight. So that's what I'm calling as earth weight right over here. So for each iteration, the first thing that we want to do is we want to calculate the weight in Zortan. So let me create a variable called as Zortan weight, and here we need to calculate. But for calculation, let us create another function called as calculate weight. So let me write the function first and then we will create it. So calculate weight would be my function, and I need to pass my earth weight to it. Now let us go up and define this function. We have defined this function in our last video. So let me open up that file right over here. So the file was called as weight.py, and I just have to copy this, go back to my current file. Let me collapse my sidebar and let me go to the top, and we can paste it right over here. Let me also add some documentation. So what this function is doing is, this function is calculating your weight in Zortan. So this is an example of data transformation. It is taking a weight in kgs and it is returning the same weight but in Zortan in weight. You can also say that this function is a pure function since it takes one input and gives back one output. Now let us go back to our function of flying friends. So on line number 36, we are able to calculate the weight in Zortan. Now the next thing to do is, we just need to check if we can fly or not. So here we can say that if, and here we need one more function to check if we can fly or not. So first let me write it and then we will create the function. We can call that function as can fly, and we need to pass the weight in Zortan. So let me pass my Zortan weight. Now let us go up and create this function as can fly. So just let me go right over here and I can define my function as can fly. This function accepts weight and the type would be a float, and this function is going to return a boolean value. Let me write some documentation for this as well. So the only responsibility of this function is it is going to say if you can fly or not. That's why we have the return value as the boolean. So this function is also a very nice example of data transformation. So you can see that we are accepting a data which is of the type of float, then we are transforming that data and we are transforming from a float value to a boolean value. Let us see how we can write the body of this function. Now the body of this function is very simple. We just have to say that we have to return if my weight is less than or equal to our constant of maximum flying weight. So what we are doing is we are basically composing functions where each function has only a single responsibility. For example, this function of can fly, the only responsibility of this function is to say you if you can fly or not. Now the only responsibility of this function calculate weight is just to transform the weight from the earth to the Zortanian weight. Now let us go back. On line number 47, we have created this function can fly. Now this function is returning a bool value, so we can use it with our if and else blocks. Let me take it a little up. So here we can say that if the friend can fly, then we can simply print out a nice statement saying that here we can put the name and then we can display the weight in Zortan, and then we can say kgs can fly on Zortan. Else, that means the friend can't fly. In that case, let us print out another statement saying that the name followed by the Zortan weight can only walk on Zortan. Let us save it and let us try running this file. But before we can run this file, we have to invoke our main function. So let me go at the bottom, and here I can say that I want to invoke my main function. So I can say main followed by our brackets. Let me save it, and now let's run this file. So here we have the output. CC, the weight is 10.75 in Zortan, so she can fly. But for Nico weighs 16.75, so he can only walk on Zortan, and similar with Zico as well. So getting back to our program, what we have done is we have seen how to create functions which can have a single responsibility principle.